15 people. I didn't really have much time, but my wife wanted to see Malcolm to tell him off for punk rock, so we sort of fixed up a meeting, and he came down to Sam, and he told me about this crazy idea he had. He told me about people scratching records, and it just sounded insane, but he played me this tape. It was a little cassette of the world's famous Supreme team that he'd recorded on a ghetto blaster in New York. And it was quite an eye-opener. I'd never heard anything like it in my life. And Malcolm looked a bit dangerous, so I thought I'd give it a shot.
I mean, was it a difficult album to work on?
Well, it was at times. I mean, there was a point in New York where I tried to quit because I'd spent 14 hours in the studio with a bunch of guys bashing drums. I went down to his room to tell him that I was going to quit. And he was pacing up and down, and there was sheets of paper everywhere. And he said, I've stayed up all night and I've written all of the songs for the album. So I felt really guilty, so I said, well, Malcolm, I want to go home. And he said, oh my God, no, it was just like this when we were doing the Great Rock and Roll Swindle. And he sang me one of these songs he'd written, and it was just so bad, I didn't have the heart to go, really.
And now there's the Zang Tum Tum label. How involved are you with that?
Well, I'm sort of completely involved in it. You know, Zang Tum Tum is distributed through Ireland. I mean, the whole thing came about because my manager, Jill Sinclair, who's also my wife, and myself were having dinner with Chris Blackwell one night. It was the first time we'd seen him for ages, and he said that he was selling this place to Richard Branson, the place where we are now, which is the Old Island Studios. And he said that he wasn't really very keen on selling it to Richard Branson. He said, do you want it, you know? So I've always wanted a studio, and I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind it, you know. And he said, well, why don't you start a label?
Your next project is to go to America and do an album with Foreigner. Have you heard the songs yet?
Well, that's the reason I'm doing it, actually, because I heard the songs. I mean, at first I was a little bit reluctant because I've just spent 10 months producing Yes. And the original idea, you know, I mean, I wanted to produce a sort of live band because I was getting a bit tired of machinery at the time. And now, after 10 months of that, I was glad to get back to the machinery.
You were actually a performer with Yes and the Buggles, and now you seem to be exclusively a producer. Are you happier that way, or do you miss performing?
Well, you know, I think to be an artist, you have to have a completely different set of talents, you know. I can never really believe in it. I mean, you've got to have that sort of, you've got to want that kind of thing. You've got to want that sort of recognition, and I never really wanted it very much. It always got on my nerves. I'd rather not be recognised in the street. I always feel very, you know, like miming on TV shows used to freak me completely. I mean, standing 10 feet away from somebody who was drinking a cup of tea, and I'd be trying to sort of quasi-perform some song, you know, do a playback. I used to just think this is completely ludicrous. I mean, this is really not the sort of thing that a grown man should do. Mm. Besides, I haven't got very good legs, and I think it's essential that if you're going to be a really good artist, it doesn't matter if you're as ugly as anything, but you've got to have good legs. And mine a bit knock-kneed and a bit fat at the top, you know.
Trevor, thanks very much for that.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Trevor.